I was 39 weeks pregnant, which, everybody considers full term. And I was at my OB for my last visit. We were basically wrapping up, and he had a medical student with him that day. So she comes over and is trying to find her heartbeat. It's just the medical student. She probably doesn't know what she's doing. I'm just like trying to calm myself. And then he said, well, try over there, move it around, and then he basically just was like, there it is. There's no heartbeat. I'm so sorry. It just, everything just stops. And it's just such a shocking thing, like what happened? In late 2017, we found out we were pregnant with our third child. When you find out you're pregnant, every reaction has been very different. So with our third, we were about to have three under like 3.5. So we were like, oh no, we were feeling very overwhelmed about that. But we have our two boys at home. So once we found out we were having a girl, it really changed the excitement and just the idea of adding a girl to the mix. And we were going over the top with all the fluffy things, pink, and, you imagine everything. You imagine your whole life going to the ballet together and walking her down the aisle, and just the dynamic between the brothers with the little girl. And so largely had a pretty healthy pregnancy. Our firstborn is a preemie, so I was checking my blood pressure a lot at home. And so when I was 38 weeks pregnant, I took a really high blood pressure reading at home and called the nurse, and she's like, come on in. And so I went in, and they monitored me, and there were no changes in blood pressure. They monitored both of us, and everything was fine. The stats were fine. They gave me a bag of fluid and sent us home. And so because our firstborn came so early, we know the value of like every day in the womb matters,
Yes.
And so even though I was 38 weeks pregnant, she was, pretty much like 7 pounds. And we just went in there like, are we going to have a baby today? But we didn't. They sent us home, and we were like, okay, good. We weren't really quite ready.
Yeah, we were excited about it. I mean, glad. Blood pressure normalized, and I went in kind of like, we're not having a baby today.
Yeah.
It's okay.
We
We're
weren't
good.
sure.
Yeah.
Right. And so it was 1 week later. I was 39 weeks pregnant, which, everybody considers full term. And I was at my OB for my last visit before our planned C-section just a couple days later. And it's a quick visit, just weight, blood pressure, everything good, go over the details for the C-section a couple days later. He went to work in the morning. And the doctor, we were basically wrapping up, and he had a medical student with him that day. So she comes over and is trying to find her heartbeat. So the baby's big. So it's pretty easy to find the heartbeat, so it was taking her a little bit. And then I saw the doctor kind of looking over, and in my head, I'm kind of saying like, it's just the medical student. She probably doesn't know what she's doing. I'm just like trying to calm myself. And then he said, well, try over there, move it around, and then he comes over and takes over, and he's looking for the heartbeat all over. And inside, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this doesn't happen. I'm sure she's okay. I don't know. She's just hiding. She's just like, but babies at 39 weeks, they don't they're born fine, safe and alive and healthy, and I'm sure she's fine. And it just felt like it was going on and on and on. And then he said, well, let's go around the corner to the ultrasound machine. They had an ultrasound around the corner. So I walked around the corner with them and just laid flat on the table, and all these other people came in the room, and I had my hands over my face because I could just see all their faces above me, and I didn't want to look at their faces. And it just took a minute for them to turn on the machine and everything. And then he basically just was like, there it is. There's no heartbeat. I'm so sorry. It just, everything just stops. And it's just such a shocking thing, like what happened there. I mean, we just live in this culture that doesn't believe a baby at 39 weeks can just die in the womb. And you're just there trying to, I just wailed, and also just thought about, like, I have to now call my husband who's at work and tell him, and like what's going to happen now. And you're just trying to, it's just such a shock. Like you cannot absorb this information. Like it's just not a reality, so I was like, should we drive to his work so I can tell him and just trying to figure out what's next. And eventually I just thought I better just call him and tell him so he can come.
Were you alone?
I was alone.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. With all the nurses and everything. I didn't really know them very well. But yeah.
It was a regular checkup. She went over there by herself because there wasn't any complications. It was just a simple check-in prior to delivery. Figured go in, do a simple check, and then on her way. And so I'm at work, and when I see a call come through, not surprising, she figured she was just calling to say, hi, I'm leaving, going and doing something. And when I answer the call, it's immediately, when you're married long enough, you recognize a tone, and immediately you could tell, like, what's wrong. And she could only say, Dan, and I was like, what's happening, and I can't imagine what's going on with her on the other side, because she's, I have to say, like, she's gone. And so immediately, like, where are you? And like, how can I get to you? And so when I found out she was still at the doctor's, I said, should go to the hospital. I'm like, I'm going to meet you at the hospital. Go ahead. So I get to the hospital and come running in. And at this point, I don't have any other detail. Like, in my head, the only thing I really understood is they haven't found the heartbeat. I'm like, okay, get in my head, get to the hospital. And if we have to deliver, let's get to delivery.
Like, he's thinking, like, maybe they can still do something.
Yeah.
Right.
And so
everyone's like moving around very slowly.
Yeah. So I come in and nobody's doing anything. She's sitting on the chair, and rush over to her, and nobody's doing anything. I started asking, like, why is she not in delivery? They say, she ate that morning, so she can't.
It was a C-section, and I had eaten. So we just kind of like, we had to wait.
Yeah. And it, admittedly, from my side, it took me a lot longer than it took anybody else in there to realize the reality that nobody's rushing. This is not an emergency because she's gone.
Right.
Now we know that actually, I think the care is changing for stillbirth families. Mm-hmm. I've heard of doctors like giving families the chance to, would you like to just go home? Would you like to go home and process, and what's the rush? You can come back tomorrow. And I think that would have actually been nice, like, because there's no rush, and it just gives you a moment to process before you have to go through the delivery and all that. I've seen some people even go and do some photos of the belly, and and so I think that's a really awesome thing because we don't have enough in us to ask or to, we're just going along with the protocol.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I actually love that they give families the chance to just, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know how common it is, but I know that some providers are offering that.
I'm sure you're not even aware to think about anything like that.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
I mean-
in that situation, it's
Yeah.
why would we even occur to us? That is after the fact,
Yeah.
and one of our ongoing portions of the story is like focusing in on those things that we wish we had.
Yeah.
We wish somebody would have helped us with
Yeah.
in that situation, because we're processing through the gravity of we just lost our daughter. We're not thinking about pictures and
Yes.
anything else at that point.
And you really need those people surrounding you to be your brain and help think.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
yes, and
Yeah.
because you can't think about any of it. And so, and we were really blessed by, I think God has definitely provided a lot of people throughout this experience and throughout our story that just, were real blessings in the moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't realize it necessarily at that time, but there are aspects of our story where I don't know that it would have been as positive a point, as much as you can say positive a point. Those little gifts that help carry us around
Sure.
through moments. Reflect back, I'm like, there's no reason why that should have happened the way that it did. It's a God thing. So I sitting around for basically a couple of hours, in waiting for the appropriate time, and it was 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock that afternoon that we went in for delivery. And again, it's that emotional shift at that point. We're now at that point, and we like acknowledge that they even acknowledge the medical professionals that at half the time we don't even know what happened in stillbirth, and so we going in not really sure about whether we were going to have any clarity around why we lost her.
And I think we wanted to know that reason, and I hate that so many stillbirth families just don't know. I mean, this is, babies that are full term and they don't just die for no reason, and Abby died of a hypercoiled umbilical cord, which we never even knew there was such a thing.
Never heard of it.
But the umbilical cord has like a natural spiral to it. So, and her cord was completely twisted off, like right at her belly button. There were 2 complete twists, and she just cut off her supply.
Wow.
And so we have a photo of it, and our doctor told us pretty soon, right after she was born, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Is it common?
I don't think cord accidents are one of the most common causes of stillbirth, but it is fairly common. And you can have a lot of different kinds of cord accidents. A true knot, which is a complete knot in the cord, the nuchal cord around the neck, hypercoiled or undercoiled cord, or you can have like what do they call it? Just like a pinch in the cord that can cause death, and they say these cord accidents just take a matter of seconds. And we never had heard such a thing. Like I said, she was completely 100% healthy. I was healthy. My pregnancy was healthy. So, it just adds to the shock of her death that it was nothing we were expecting. And, and again, it's just, she's a healthy child. So healthy kids just don't die.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she was born by C-section, just before 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And, I think there was another added element. Somehow you're still, they say she's gone, but then as she's being born, you're like, maybe she'll, you just have this hope. And, at some point we kind of knew that she was born and that she was just on the side. And, it was all that we could do to just like get through that C-section though. And,
There was a certain point where I knew she was delivered, and you're just like, you hold your breath waiting for it, and it doesn't happen. And again, it's another one of those heartbreak moments. And then to their credit, they asked if I'd like to see her, and it was at that point Kristen is in the middle of major surgery. My focus is
Yeah.
right at this point, making sure that she's okay.
Yeah.
So we know we're going to see her, like not right now. We can't,
Yeah.
we just need to focus on each other. Let's get through the rest of the surgery. And so they took her, cleaned her, and said, we'll prep her for you guys afterward. And so,
And we knew we wanted to see her and
Yeah,
spend
yeah.
time with her. And one thing they told us before is if you're worried about like what she looks like, you can ask the nurse to describe her, which I liked that idea.
Yeah.
But Dan caught a glimpse of her in the hallway when I was being wheeled down to recovery, and he said, "She's so beautiful."
Yeah. And it was at that point when we were able to like confirm, like, do we know what happened? And that's when they said yes. We took a picture, and so it was that little gift that we got, and she was perfect. She was beautiful. Yeah, there was nothing wrong with her. So it was a little gift because you don't know going in. Like, there's no explanation until we get in there, and even then, half the time you don't know.
Yeah.
So we were in that beneficial half, 50% that we had the gift of knowing what happened. Doesn't make it better, but we always want to have the why answered.
Yeah.
We had that gift. And so, Kristen was wheeled out, and they asked me if I wanted to hold her, and wanted to make sure Kristen was the first to hold her. So once she got into recovery, they immediately brought Abby over,
Yeah.
and Kristen got to hold her for the first
She
time.
wasn't named quite yet.
No, she wasn't.
But when they gave her to me, I had a moment of just joy, and I was taken back about how beautiful she was, and just like any parent does when they put the baby in your arms for the first time. And it was still the same kind of thing, and it was so strange to also be taking in that she's not moving and she's not breathing, and she just looks like she's just gonna like stir or coo or so it's just such a strange thing. I don't know how else to describe, to try to take that in at the same time, meeting your child and also like just gazing upon her lifeless body.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when was this photo taken?
So this photo was taken the day after she was born. So she was born on July 13th, and this was taken on July 14th. And we didn't know how quickly her little body would change.
Yeah.
So she looks beautiful in this photo, but she had changed, and we wish they had done the photos the day before. It was a Friday, and everything was shuffled. Hospitals, I think, kind of shut down for the weekend and change. And anyway, but we're really grateful for the photos. It was just a local group that comes and does the photos of the babies. But of course, we wish we had a million more.
Yeah.
But we are grateful for what we have.
Yeah. Again, one of those lessons learned after the fact.
Yeah.
Groups that you don't want to know about, but there are two major volunteer groups that support and take care of photographing and stillbirth and miscarriage and whatnot.
So what was your process after to process the grief and get into this new?
Our new life.
It's a fair question, and before we get after, we were given the gift, and so as we were in that waiting process, pre-delivery, the doctors were honest, and we really appreciated the nurses, especially coming in and saying, "You're going to have as much time as you want afterward. You're going to be able to spend time with her, and it's your choice about how much time you want to spend." So we knew after delivery, Kristen's going through recovery, but we knew we had time with her. And so I think, as we talk about that grief process, and one of the most important things that we were gifted was time with her. And thankfully, it's one of those pieces where we are at least cognizant enough to know we don't want to be the only ones with memories of her.
Yeah.
And so we got a day and a half with her before we realized we had to say goodbye. Again, because of the body kind of breaking down. But in that period of time, we had immediate family
Mhm.
and some close friends of ours that were
yeah.
gracious enough to come
Yes.
into
Wow.
that space with us, and spend time with us, spend time with her.
They held her, and I even remember sitting around like laughing
Yeah.
with our friends. I don't know what we were laughing at, but we were.
Doesn't matter at this point.
Yeah, it felt kind of normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For a minute, we had, our nurse was like, there's no people. It seemed like they were coming and going in perfect waves, and it was beautiful. It was a beautiful day
Yep.
together before we had to say goodbye. So
Yeah.
I don't know. And we said goodbye, and we came home to our house, and both our moms were there sort of helping with our little guy. And it was like we came home to a life that there was no little girl, and it was kind of strangely like just how it was before. It was almost like she never existed, or she just vanished, or there was just some idea of her, and she was just gone, And I think early on we were just really committed to the idea of healthy grieving. You see so many bad examples of people who have unresolved grief and what that has done to their life 10, 20 years and years and years down the road. And so what did that look like for us, in those early days? But then it's changed. We're 5 years in now, and so, we'll be grieving every day for the rest of our lives, but it sure doesn't look like what it looked like then.
Yeah.
And thank God for that. Those early days, I mean, we did grief share early on. His mom came and was with the boys so we could go do that. And we did counseling, couples counseling, and we had some really great friends that were really willing to listen.
Yeah.
I
Just
think-
come alongside and walk with us.
An important,
That's rare.
yeah. They were so great. Like,
Yeah.
an important piece of the conversation is that, when Abby died, I'm the patient, and a lot of the focus comes to me. And with pregnancy loss, there's a lot of focus and support out there for moms, and people will come to Dan and say, "Oh, how's Kristin doing?" Like the loss is mine.
Yeah.
And there is an attachment to it because she died in my womb. So that's complicated for me. But dads are so often left out or just
Minimize.
Yeah. I think both of them are true. Minimalized and minimized. Yeah.
But their version of the story and their pain is just is kind of like put on the sideline, and people don't understand that they carry that. And I remember one of our good friends said, "How are you?" And like, "Are you okay?" And it's okay if you're falling apart too. I was kind of very real. Like I did not like to say to people when they say, "How are you?" which I realize that's such a cultural thing that we say, "How are you?" Like, not great. I would just say, or we're standing upright today. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I just tried to be very real, but our friend Chris was like, it's okay if you're not okay too.
Yeah. Yeah. And that made a difference. Admittedly, I wasn't even, I think as men, as husbands, like, or we put on that protector, caretaker hat, and it's where I default to, just like a lot of us. And so it took me a while to realize how not okay I was, and took a lot of personal emotional turmoil before I kind of realized. And so it meant a lot that friend Chris and there were some others that were very intentional. I think in part because some of them had gone through grief themselves,
Right.
and realized like this is not an isolated. This is not a mom's experience. This is a parent's experience, and that made a huge difference. Even just being able to like vocalize. I can't even tell you what I feel. I just know I'm not okay.
Yeah.
And we're not okay.
Yeah.
It's the recognition that like this isn't. We both have our own independent grief experience, but there's a shared grief experience.
Right.
Partially because of having to support our kids and walking alongside with them.
and trying to support each other.
and exactly.
I think just in those early days, like just normalizing grief is so important. Like just understanding, oh, I'm not losing my mind. I'm just grieving. It's grief to, not even care about taking a shower for many days in a row or forgetting to eat or what, I heard one lady in grief share say it took me 8 months to be able to read a magazine, a page in a magazine. And I was like, thank you for saying that. Like yes, and just like normalizing grief, especially early on in the midst of a culture that does not understand grief or has some really off base ideas about grief and loss is so important.
Yep, it really is.
Yeah. And I think specifically in the pregnancy and infant loss world, people really don't understand our loss and our pain. And so we were early on met with these ideas of, well, at least you have your boys, or at least she never took a breath outside the womb, or you can have another baby, and just realizing those things. People are saying that they don't know better. They're saying that to try to help us cope or heal, not heal, but feel better, or, trying to force like a gratitude on us from the outside. And, and so you're already grieving, and then you're having to try to push back against these ideas. No, it's not okay. We do have our 2 boys at home, and we are grateful for them. And I have a daughter who has just died, and that's a terrible heartache and a grief that, will plague us like for the rest of our lives. Number 3 is always missing. And so like just grasping those ideas that like this is just what people say, and it's so weird. Even in our grief share group, like somebody said, you can have another baby, like,
And it's true.
what?
It's a true statement.
Yeah, it is.
But
But completely missed.
but it's
Not
like,
everybody can have another
and
baby.
that's and that is fair. But it's like, you can say that, and like, I appreciate you saying that, but that has nothing to do with our grief.
What is the best response to that? Because I'm sure other people.
Well, first you take a big deep breath. I just, when we're in the right mind frame, I just think it's important for us to help educate people, in a really gentle way, because they're not, their heart is in the right spot. They're not trying to be hurtful, but to do better for the next people, and say, actually, that's not helpful, and we can be so grateful for our boys at home and devastated that our daughter's not here all together at the same time. And that's what we do in grief. We have the grateful and the grieving together. And that's how our journey is now.
Yeah. It is, like you said, it is a very cultural thing. And I always think about how, even back in the time of the Israelites back in the 1st century, they would hire mourners because they wanted to live in their grief.
Yeah.
And it was important to live in their grief.
And culturally accepted and recognized.
accepted.
There were people who were paid as mourners.
I would have loved
Like,
that.
that's a societal expectation.
Get the veil.
Yeah. No, it was,
Well, outside the
Right?
house.
Right.
Yes.
it was
And we
interesting.
look at that today. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
We look at that today and we think, oh, that's so weird. Why would they hire mourners? We're just the opposite. We need mourners. We need to learn how to mourn.
I know.
We basically try to put on this painted face and, it's okay. And
Because culturally, that's the expectation.
that's it.
That's the expectation. I was just going to share, because again, this speaks into cultural expectations. Admittedly, going into this, my recognition of my own ignorance.
Yeah.
I remember a few months after losing Abby, we went away with some friends just because we needed time away. And we had 2 sets of friends who had like early child loss, but child loss nonetheless. And I sat with them, and because I was reflecting, like, I didn't do a good job of coming alongside of them. And I flat out was remember distinctly sitting down, me and 2 of my good buddies, the dads.
Yeah.
I sit down and like looked at both of them. Why didn't you tell me your experience? I'm like, I had to apologize to them. I'm like, now sitting where I'm at, I did not do a good job of being a friend to you. Like, why didn't you tell me what you were going through? And for both of them, they were really gentle and acknowledging. Like, we had different experiences than you guys did. but they both acknowledged like we didn't know how to
Yeah.
tell anybody how to support us. But I had to apologize myself because I realized I was ignorant until we went through that.
Yes.
And I think the reason we're ignorant is twofold. One, we don't see it in our culture. Nobody's modeling it for us. We try to hide it away. We don't want to talk about it. And people feel like they have to withdraw and keep it to themselves and be strong,
Right.
Yeah.
But also in the church, there's so much grief in the Psalms.
Yes, there is.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
We do not reflect on that. It's not even in our music.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
we don't have any language in our culture or in our churches about how to grieve.
Yeah.
I know.
And the healthiness. It's a very healthy thing to grieve. It's important.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. It's actually vital.
It's vital.
Vital.
That's right.
Right.
That's
To
right.
come out. Right.
Yeah. Just because we have hope of heaven doesn't change the fact that grief is present here.
Right.
It doesn't diminish it, or it might diminish the overall sting,
Yeah.
but it doesn't negate it.
Yeah.
And I think we forget that.
Yeah.
We recognize it. I think we
Right.
forget that. And even our experience within the church, that the church wasn't a refuge for us. Our friends were a refuge. Counseling was a refuge. The community that we found and while we're waiting in grief share, admittedly, was a refuge for us. But the church, quite honestly, we ended up having to transition churches because we needed a refuge. We needed to find anonymity because it was a weird and somewhat unhealthy space. It's no judgment, but people don't know how to support.
Yeah.
So we needed to remove ourselves just to be able to focus on God. And I tell you, from our own journey with God, we weren't seeking out a church that understood grief. We were given the gift of a church, unrecognized. We didn't know his story coming in.
No, we didn't.
It was a story that we found out after the fact.
It's just where
But-
the place that had grief share down the road, you
Yeah.
know, and we ended
Yeah.
up there, and then
Wow.
But I tell you, I mean, it's one of the sermons that sticks out to me. I believe it was Easter, talking about the miracles, Christ raising
people from the
people
dead.
from the dead. And I remember thinking to myself as we're sitting there listening to it, I could not hear this story. I could not hear this message from anybody who doesn't understand what it's like to have a child who died.
Yeah.
And Jesus chose not to
Right.
work that miracle.
Yeah.
Like, because we were sitting there, we were those people in the hospital praying for a miracle
Yeah.
that wasn't answered.
Yeah.
It's like, don't talk with me about what Jesus can do, because he didn't do it for us. But it was a
But we
different story to
believe he
hear.
would.
Yeah,
We prayed and prayed and prayed,
Absolutely.
you know, that
Absolutely.
he would do that.
but to be able to hear that truth, that God does have that power, that it can happen, that we should still pray for those miracles, if not for us, then for somebody else. To be able to hear somebody who knows our experience, our grief, and can still say this is still true. Like, there was a gift that we were given. Didn't realize we needed it, but we were given that.
Yeah, for sure.
How was the support that you found from your church family?
They loved us really well. They really did. They cooked us meals for 6 months, but they just didn't know how to give us what we needed. We probably could have done a better job of communicating that. But one of our biggest needs early on was just going to church and kind of sitting in the back and being anonymous. You know, at our old church, we would come in and we got the looks and how are you? And we're like, just the tears are about to fall off our eyelids, and we're like just barely like getting in the back. We would show up late, we would leave early.
Yeah.
And we were like, we need to go be anonymous. But
Yeah, no, I mean, it's because people were kind enough to ask,
Yeah.
but admittedly, perhaps we didn't do a good enough job of like articulating what we need in those points. I don't know that we could articulate what we need.
really no.
Yeah. And admittedly, going in, we started showing up late and leaving early, not because they didn't do a good enough job of caring for us, because people would ask. But again, we're walking in, I'm like, there are times when you want to be asked how you're doing. There's also times when you don't. And there's also, you realize, I think after the fact, in the moments you don't recognize, like, I don't know that I want to open up to you.
Yeah.
And it's no judgment on you, but it's just,
Yeah.
I'm not in a headspace, and our relationship isn't in such a manner that I'm like, I feel comfortable. So thank you for asking that.
Yeah.
But we're okay. And then you
Yeah.
move on and you realize like,
Yeah.
I'm not okay. And I'm not okay with saying
Yeah.
that because I don't like acting that way. And so you just, it kind of, we both got to a point of recognizing that like, we can't keep coming back here because we recognize in that season, we desperately need God. Desperately. And continuing to come here, we don't like missing worship. We don't like leaving early. Like that's not what our church experience that's not what we want it to be.
Yeah.
And so we realized quickly, not that we needed to leave that church, but we needed to find someplace else to go just for a season. And it ended up becoming a much longer season.
So when Tristan went to heaven, our children were older.
Yeah.
So we were in a house where everything had changed. Everyone was grieving. Can you speak to what it was like to have a discrepancy between what's going on inside of you with this horrible loss and stepping into a household where there's routines that need to be made and they're same old. But
Right.
it's completely different.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
The little
Great
kids.
What did you do?
Oh man. The boys were 20 months and like not quite 3.5 when Abby died. First of all, just telling them, our pediatrician came to the hospital and sort of helped talk us through what that would look like. She said, be concrete and straightforward. Don't use words like she's asleep or she's too sick because that's very confusing. Her heart stopped. She died and she's in heaven. Like that was that. And that's what we did. And then he just started playing motorcycles, like, and we're like, oh, okay, motorcycles. I mean, they couldn't. And as they've gotten older, our oldest is now 8. So it's almost like they re-grieve when they can understand more. Last summer, they wanted to, they started asking all these questions about a cemetery. Like, what is that? And what does that mean? And then is Abby, in the cemetery? Well, no, she's cremated. What's that? Like, oh boy. I mean,
And laugh about it, but it's
Yeah.
like, how do you articulate this?
and I don't want to just when they're 14, like drop that on like
Yeah.
they can understand in their 5-year-old way. They've already grasped so much. So we did share, we omitted some words, in a careful way that, her body was cremated and she's turned to ashes and we have her remains in this little, did you recognize this picture? Oh, that's in your room. And, the urn that we have. And they even wanted to see them, her cremains. And I said, well, maybe later.
Yeah.
That part we weren't ready for.
Yeah, we haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
And they really haven't really asked about it.
Yeah, but it's heartbreaking to watch them like grasp it on different levels, But that early on, when they were so young, like we were just torn apart with grief. And I just remember at grief share saying that my kids are never going to have a mom who's not in grief. And just thinking of like how I was at those, like it was so hard to just be with them. And they require a lot of energy and attention and it's so hard.
What I will say though, I think for both of us, we tried to be as honest and transparent. And so even you have those times and for you guys experience, like you just start crying. Something hits you and you start crying and the kids ask, why are you crying? And we're honest because we missed Abby, and it was one of those things someone intentionally didn't try to hide our experience from them because seeing grief happen isn't important. Like they need to understand that this is a really sad loss. Even if they don't feel it, it's important for them to see it.
Yes.
And I think it's allowed us, as they've grown and as they've matured, as Kristin said, they've asked a lot more questions. And it was a gift. I don't think we went into it necessarily intentionally. Like she's as real to them as she is to us.
Wow.
Yeah.
It is.
Because of their age, they didn't meet her.
Yeah.
But Abby is present on a daily basis in our life and even for our kids. And so now 5 years removed, more than 5 years removed, they're starting the school year. They just did a few weeks ago and Kristin does a great job of communicating with the teachers that as you ask about our families, they might talk about a sister in heaven. They might draw pictures of a sister in heaven. Like, this is why.
That's great.
Because
Yeah.
that's a really very present in their lives.
That's smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like all those back to school, it's like, tell us about your family. Families are so complicated, you know? And I don't like, it's hard for me when people ask me,
Yeah.
oh, which answer am I going to give you? 3
Yeah.
kids or 4, you know? And I think about that on a 6-year-old level. So I just always like to tell the teacher, like, they're not crazy, and,
Yeah.
you know, and it's
They
okay
might
with
be
us.
about this.
Yeah. It's okay if they talk about her or draw her, and it's okay if they don't, but just so you know, you can maybe help them
Yeah.
if they have to, I don't know, share with the class or something. You know,
Is that well received by the teachers?
it's interesting. I think you can, when they write back, you can kind of tell, like, if they've processed some kind of grief on some level. So,
Yeah.
but at least they understand, like, where we're coming from with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whether or not they get it, it's just an important piece that they understand.
How did you lean on the Lord, or how did you see Him walking with you through this?
It's a great question. I'll be honest, from day one, this has been one of those areas of our journey that different people resonate with. I don't know that there was a single point at which we ever didn't realize the need. In my heart, I don't think if I ever was angry at God for what happened. Never blamed Him for what happened. And I think because of that, from day one, we were talking about music. Like, music was a really central and integral part of even our journey with Abby while we were at the hospital. And it was surrounding us. We needed it. And it's become one of those bedrocks that help remind us of what that experience was, and reground us in what truth is. Because we've recognized all the way through it, like, there is no path through grief without God. There is no hope. What does hope look like?
Yeah.
And that really set us in a firm foundation that, like, we need to focus on what hope looks like.
Yeah.
Because we're not feeling it right now, and there is no path to hope without God.
Yeah.
So we leaned on Him extremely heavily, as we talked about, like, our journey in coming back to the church. Our transitions at church were firmly planted in the fact that, like, we need to be able to commune with Him well. Like,
Yeah.
we need no distractions. We need to be present.
Yeah, I think, like Dan said, we didn't really grapple with, like, why, like, pointing our finger at God, you know. But I guess one of the things I wrestled with was just, could He prevented this? Could He have prevented her death? Yes, He had the power to do that, but He chose not to, you know. And so there's wrestling involved in that, and just understanding, okay, so what then, you know? I believe, like, I don't think we ever really strayed far from believing, like, He is good, and this death was not in vain, you know, that it's not just something that just happened, like, God's like, oh, whoops, you know.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, it doesn't just,
Right.
there's purpose
Yes.
in everything that He does. And, like, we try to make sense of that. Like, I hope in heaven we get there one day and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
that, and He's connected to
Yes.
this and that, and
Yes.
I don't know how that all
Yeah, I
works,
know.
but, like,
I know.
it just feels like we'll understand more, or, you know, we're not seeing through the veil anymore, and just to understand what that's about, you know. And so that's hard, though, like,
Yeah.
knowing that God had the power to prevent her death, and saying, like, okay, but you're still good, and you know, you're still loving and you're kind. And we've seen that all over our lives, like His grace to us and His presence with us as we've walked through this journey, you know, on the darkest days and through the darkest moments, you know.
And as we talked briefly about, especially through our journey in the hospital, and then shortly after, reflecting back on it, points that we point to God and say, like, you orchestrated this. It's like it mentioned the pediatrician.
Yeah.
Pediatrician was doing rounds. There was no intention of her being there. She happened to see us and came over and met with us. We happened to find out she was a Christian, and was able to, like, now she is now a part of our story. And as we wrestled with how do we say goodbye, she became part of that, like, our ability to say goodbye, because we knew we were handing her, Abby, over to somebody.
We left Abby with her at the hospital.
Yeah.
We didn't want to leave her with just
A random
somebody
nurse.
we didn't know.
Well,
Yeah.
that's great.
But to be gifted with somebody who, like, we knew personally, that we found out through this time, had the same beliefs, to be able to, like, she willingly walked into it with us. Similarly, there was a babysitter who still is part of our life, that it was a gift. It was an emergency situation. We needed a babysitter early in that beginning of that summer. She ended up coming, like, last second. Her schedules aligned.
Wow.
But she was an absolute gift to us through that season, where we reflect back, like, God, you were orchestrating things on our behalf.
Yes.
Knowing the journey we're about to walk through, you were orchestrating things on our behalf. And it's those little gifts in the midst of the grief, in the midst of the torment, that we just see his hand moving. And admittedly, as, like, we know that there's purpose and in everything that happens. We don't understand it now.
Right.
Part of our journey continues to be, God, show us your purpose, use us in this. Our discussions that we had, our involvement in While We're Waiting, leading a support group and the retreats is as a byproduct of, like, we don't want to be a part of this community, but we are.
Yeah.
And the recognition there's a lot of others. As we started this discussion, our culture doesn't recognize, like, grief as a real thing. And so if we see it, and we recognize God can still work through this, God is still to be glorified through this. Like, part of our journey is just trying to align with whatever he's doing. If he puts it on our heart, we're going to follow.
Right.
Yeah.
And we've gotten so much now out of walking with other people through their dark journeys. Not that we've arrived or anything, but I think we're at a point where we have, by the grace of God, we have an ability to come along and to help them process and where they're at. And, we do that through While We're Waiting. And we have a local program here at the hospital. And I can go into a room where a family's had a miscarriage, stillbirth, infant loss, and help them talk and process and make some mementos, some footprints, and some plaster molds.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah, things for them to take home and hang on to. So just to be able to walk through those moments with them, and and it's just we have something to offer. We have experience that we've lived through, and we've made it this far, and I remember early on seeing those people that were 2 or 5 or 10 years, and you're like, and you're still here, or you're wearing mascara, or I was blown away about the mascara for a long time. I was like, wow, and they can talk, and your child is still just a part of your life, and you can involve them in everything that you do and talk about them and not be completely a puddle on the floor, but it's just it's a beautiful thing to be part of other people's journey,
It is.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
Not how we thought God would use us on this earth.
Oh gosh.
No, not at all.
And it's a new meaning to whatever you ask of me, Lord, I'm available. Here I am, Lord, before this loss. You
I
can
know
do that and think, oh yes, here I am.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had a nonprofit that I founded and I ran. We poured ourselves into this ministry. We sacrificed everything to just get it up and going. And shortly after Abby died, it was like, that's done. We need to be done with this chapter. And it's a pain. It was the right decision for our family, but it is painful. It's so painful. And, and I think I was processing this weekend. Like, I don't know if we would have space for while we're waiting and to come alongside these other families if that was still part of our life and our ministry. And it's a different loss, but it's part of our loss of Abby, and all the secondary things that follow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're grieving more than just the loss.
For sure.
Yeah.
Child.
So
Yeah.
much.
Loss of many things,
Yeah.
layers.
And that's an interesting
That's right.
aspect that as you start the journey of grief, as you immediately get into it, it's so heavy, and you don't even think about it until suddenly other losses start happening around you, and like, dear God, why? But you don't even go into it thinking it. It's like, all right, I need to process this. Like, no, there's 1,000 things that you need to process.
Yeah.
Either rethinking or multiple griefs that you're having to process through. You're not realizing it day one, but as time goes on, you realize there's scattered damage all over the place.
Yeah. Scattered damage. I like the way that you put that.
And it's not just around you, it's also in the different parts of your heart of things that you once wanted to do, or you had a
that's
passion for.
Yeah.
Those are gone.
Right.
Yeah.
nothing.
100%.
It rearranges your insides.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah. And from an emotional perspective and the candid acknowledgement, I think this is, a truism. The more we talk to parents who have gone through grief, like, my mind doesn't work the same way anymore.
Yeah.
My memory doesn't function the
Nope.
same way anymore. It's like goofy
Physical,
stuff. Like, why did
yes,
this not come
other
back?
physical
Yeah.
issues, and yeah.
And it's scary because you're wondering, am I going to be able to think the way I
Yeah.
used to
Yeah.
again?
Clarity.
Or is it gone?
Is it? Yeah.
And for me, because of my age, I'm thinking, well, this is it. It's over.
There's no
recovery
that ship
now.
has sailed. But you're absolutely right though, and you're having to, like, all right, I've always been a note taker. I'm a voracious note taker now, I'm candid with you. My mind doesn't work the same way. I will not. I can't trust my memory anymore.
Yeah. I even don't trust my ability to make a decision sometimes.
Oh, that's an important one. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we've talked about, we have 3 young kids at home still, but the house feels like so cluttered because I think a lot of it is like, I feel decision paralysis because I can't,
Yes.
am I getting rid of this? Well, we need this. I just don't, I feel like I can't make a decision and move forward. So I just don't,
Yeah.
and then you're like, there's like a weight that comes with that. Then I hate that part of grief.
For me, it's not just a decision paralysis. It's I don't trust my ability
Okay.
to reason through something
Oh yeah.
just because of the nature of our loss.
Yeah.
I don't trust myself.
Yeah. Get that 100%.
Yeah.
Right.
But God's there.
But God's still there. Yeah. Fortunately, He's got grace.
Abundant.
Yeah, abundant grace,
Right.
sufficient for our chaos.
And when you can't make a decision, I think you depend upon God's sovereignty even more because He's got you. He is the one who's calling the shots, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You just have to trust him that he's
Yeah.
going to be there doing that.
yeah, and that's and you hit the nail on the head. You actually said it really eloquently. Where else, if you can't get to a point of trusting His sovereignty,
Yeah.
that brings us back to, like, you're perpetually stuck on the why,
That's right.
and
Right.
it will eat at you.
That
It
is
eats
so
at you.
true.
Like, we're going to be burdened by that question till the end. We have to come to terms with, we don't know, we won't know until we get to heaven, and by that point, it probably won't matter to us.
Yeah.
But we have to trust God
Right.
through that,
Right.
and that is one of those ever-present struggles. Like, until you come to terms with that,
Yes.
I don't know how to heal.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And you can't answer those whys. Because
Yeah.
God's ways are unsearchable.
Yeah,
His paths are past finding out.
exactly.
You have to live in that.
Yeah, you
Right.
have to hold open hands.
Right.
Say, this is not my question to answer.
Right.
I can ask the question, but
Yeah.
I won't have an answer, and I need to be okay
Right.
with not having an answer.
That's right.
But I think he can, I've grappled with, like, making peace with the pieces that we don't understand or that don't make sense or that just are so painful, to be able to live in a way that is I feel okay. I feel at peace with this where I'm at, even though I don't understand, or I don't have that. I think God can really give us a lot of peace in those areas to just let go, to let go, to not be continuing to strive and strive and strive after these pieces or these things that seem very unresolved or unsettling for us.
Yeah.
For me, it's part of losing myself in God.
Yeah.
Meaning that I know that, before Tristan died, I guess I had too much of a grip on my life and I was directing it. But now I have to say, God, you're doing something different here. And I just have to let you make me and lead me where you want. And that's it. I'm in your control.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I'm not in control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing.
But it is a hard thing, and it's something as I resonate with what you're saying. We 100% agree with you. Reflect on the ministry that we're a part of now, and I've grown immensely in my respect for Brad and for Jill and for the rest of the leadership who are coming into this, because we're now walking into a scenario with people who may be brand new to their grief, and having to come to terms with, we know that is a true statement. They're in the process, but they have to come to terms with that. It's not something that it's like we can't fix it for them.
Yeah.
We can't make that true for them. They have to come to terms with that. We can speak it.
Yes.
But there's got to also be a lot of grace and patience
Right.
to come alongside of that and say, this is going to be something that you're going to wrestle with.
Right.
Yeah.
You need to.
Yeah.
And we're not telling you have to get there today, but this is something you need to wrestle with.
And they may not see it, but you're at least giving them that guiding light path that they know that when they get on it, they're like, okay, I remember somebody told me that.
Yeah.
Right.
That's helpful. It helps them to find those ways that they have to go.
Right.
Yeah.
Even though they're not ready for them at the moment.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. But just, and that's really like, there's a path.
Yeah.
Everybody's path is different, but at least putting some of those markers, like you need to be seeking this.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Not to say that you need to be there today, because we can say truth, you can't hear it, you can't receive it.
Right.
Yeah. I was very, very fortunate. I think God prepared me, knowing, of course, and He knows the beginning from the end,
Yeah.
how long Tristan will live, that through the years, He just prepared me to fall in love with His sovereignty and to study it and highlight it throughout the whole scripture. So, at the point where He decided Tristan will live 18 years, 363 days,
Yep.
I too never was angry about it. I was able to accept, because of that preparation in scripture,
Yeah.
that he's home now. Not that his death didn't have me screaming.
Right.
No. Of course, with that death, I still carry that scream inside. No. Because it's your child, and it's not, the death of a child is not something you would ever be able to say, okay, here you go, Lord.
Right.
Yeah.
It goes against everything in you as a mom to scream against it and to scream at Him. No,
right.
Your life is precious before the Lord. Don't give your life back to Him. But because of the idea of God sovereignly allowing him to live and His story on earth to have that end. Yes. There was no anger. There was no. It made me go back to scripture and say, okay, where am I going to find in scripture where this has happened to other people?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because God has allowed this to happen to me. It's recorded in scripture.
Sure.
There's other moms that have lost people.
Yes.
Stephen.
Yes.
Stephen had a mom.
Right.
The thief on the cross had a mom.
Right.
Yep.
John the Baptist mom.
Yes.
John the Baptist. Okay, so
Jesus. Mom.
Jesus had a mom.
Mom.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they had horrible, awful deaths ordained sovereignly in scripture for purposes that will make sense when we get there.
Right.
Yeah.
And we can see sometimes in scripture where that end did have a specific purpose in scripture. We'll have to wait.
We'll see.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you guys so much for sharing your story and your
Yeah.
pain and your hope.
It's our honor.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
We love talking about it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's one of those, one of those interesting, people are afraid to ask.
Yeah.
Like, we love talking about her.
Yeah. Thank you,
You know,
for letting
even
me.
as the tears come, we love talking
Yeah,
about her. So thank you.
absolutely.